Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the special meeting of the Rogue Community College Board of Education to order at 4 p.m. And at this time, I see a number of guests in the room. It would be nice to go around and introduce ourselves. So I'll start with you, Greg.
My name is Greg McCown. I am the Chief Facilities Management Officer.
Amy Harrington, Vice President of People, Culture and Safety.
Juliette Long, Vice President, Student Learning and Success.
Mrs. Stanton, Vice President of Operations and Finance.
Nicole Secreta, Dean of Enrollment Management.
Richard Plott, Chief Information Officer.
Richard is in his second week with RCC as our new CIO.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Ikram Mohammed, Executive Director, Institutional Effectiveness.
Sinclair, Executive Director, Rogue Community College Foundation.
Lisa Parks, Dean of Business and Workforce Development.
Steve Phelps, Dean of Instruction. Dave Kohler, Dean of Instruction, Health and Public Service.
April Hamlin, Dean of Student Success.
All right, well, welcome, everyone. And I believe we have a quorum present, so we will begin with the information presentation. Wayne, do you have anything to add before we?
I will turn it over to Greg because what I will tell you is that the charge to Greg was the facilities condition update you gave, and the hearing was very well received. That's what we're asking for again. And that's what Greg asked, and he said I can do better, so he's modified it, and we're looking forward to sharing this information with you.
Right. I'm not entirely sure how to make this go away on the screen deal.
Oh, it has to stay there.
Okay, thank you.
You're not in charge.
That's okay. Thank you for allowing me to present this today. So we're just going to go over the capital outlay, specifically looking at facilities and equipment as it relates to the condition assessment that we all talked about last year. So I want to go over some key definitions. You'll hear me talk about these throughout, and they're there for your reference, but the FCA is just the condition assessment. The FCI, which is a very important piece we'll talk about 3/4 of the way through this slide presentation, is the facility condition indexing. And then the next three are critically important to this whole process, as we're going to talk about recurring, which are recurring or renewal based on the condition assessment, and those are based off of energy life cycles. Non-recurring, so unplanned corrective action repairs, and also one-time campus improvement projects, which with the newest budget process, we call them action packs. And then capital construction, which are really large scale capital construction projects, or we call them CCP, generally associated with campus master planning. Very different from the non-recurring campus improvement projects. We'll talk a little bit about preventative maintenance, and then deferred maintenance. We'll talk a lot about that, which is planned and unplanned maintenance that has been postponed, usually due to a lack of available funds. And then there are some specific references to where we pulled industry standard life cycles from, and one of them was the Association of Physical Plant Administrators. So just a quick update. I did add a few buildings on here. PRCD, excuse me, is what we're calling it. The newest property, and I did add the HEC building. Here's the LDC tally. The last time we discussed building vintage. So RCC operates 41 buildings totaling just under 500,000 square feet, but that does not include buried infrastructure, parking lots, sidewalks, or any of the outbuildings. And then approximately half of those buildings date back to 1965, and at least one of them, which is RVCB, is 1938. And roughly 80% of those buildings are all over 30 years old. So knowing that, in late 2023, the college completed a facility condition assessment, and we evaluated in that assessment these three primary categories to develop a recurring or renewal plan based on life cycle of building components, which included cost estimates and escalation, roughly a 6% escalation per year, out through the 30-year total plan. Inventoried all undocumented building equipment that requires routine services. And we had thousands essentially that we applied an asset tag and included into an inventory. And with that, developed an engineered preventative maintenance plan for all of those, which included inspections and cycling for routine maintenance. This slide I wanted to show here really illustrates the optimal performance of equipment and showing the life as the performance drops off over time as you reach industry life cycle end, but without proper maintenance, you can see how it dramatically drops off even further, forcing the organization to purchase new equipment and replace and modify their renewal plan. So from the condition assessment, this page here is really a pivot chart from a much larger, and I know these numbers are a little bit small. I try to blow them up as much as possible. But this is a pivot chart from the much larger condition assessment. And I circled a few things to bring your attention. So 1 through 5 is essentially the year left in the equipment. So if you go down, we use Coates Hall as this example here. There's a split system air handler, and it shows that there was basically 1 year left in this type of a system at a value of $150,000. And you can see that in year 4, we have another similar piece of equipment that's estimated to be about $10,500. And so with that is how we use this information to build essentially a 5-year capital plan, which we'll show here in just a little bit. But I want to draw your attention to the upper 2 circles. There's the total industry life expectancy, and then there's the total industry life remaining. And so for that piece of equipment, it's expected 15 years is what you will get out of that equipment with proper maintenance. Of course, we usually push it a little bit further, kind of like the old 1957 Chevy, you know, it's got a projected life cycle, but they're still around. And so with that methodology, this particular unit is 11 years past its life cycle. So we do also, we'll talk a little bit further on in the slides about perceived or perceived remaining life cycle. And really, the engineers that provided the condition assessment looked for how well was this piece of equipment maintained? Did we put a lot of money into it? How well did we take care of that 57 Chevy, as it were? It may not be efficient, but it's still operational. So this is just a snippet out of the actual much larger condition assessment that pivot chart was pulled from. And I just wanted to draw your attention to the same type of equipment where it shows here Coates Hall, again, gives us, you know, the approximate installation date for the item being discussed. So the first one, it's a 1.5 ton HVAC unit. Again, shows the industry expected life cycle is 15 years. Industry life remaining is 12, so there's really 1 year left. So by the time this report was completed, it was pretty much time to replace this piece of equipment. So we went through every piece of equipment, the life cycles, the notes, the flaws and issues that we found, which we found a lot of things that we really weren't anticipating. But when you go that much of a deep dive into the buildings, we were able to identify that. So here is one more kind of an executive summary, as it were, for the reporting. This is again for Coates Hall. It just gives you all the quick facts to the building off to the right. A little general building condition with a few just light images to kind of point out some of those highlights that we're talking about. And this is just a summary that went into the full condition assessment report. But one thing I want to point out to, again, you see a theme through all of the documents, is the FCI, which is the facility condition indexing. And we're going to get to that slide here coming up. Talk about what that means and why it's important. Back to the next slide. So really, this is a score. I'm just going to read it. A score obtained by dividing the cost of all equipment and building systems that are scheduled for current replacement or are backlogged, deferred, by the current replacement value of the building itself. And so really what this is just a quick dashboard view to say, how far upside down are we in this building and all the equipment that we're needing to replace? And it's not just equipment. It could be the doors, the ceiling, the floors. The condition assessment looked at the entire building structure. And when we're talking about annual budgeting and even creating a 5-year plan, do we want to put money into this facility? Maybe we just tear it down and replace it. And that's really what this is meant for. So this is not an all inclusive, but there's quite a few, most of our buildings are on here as a representative example. So again, going back to Coates Hall, you can see that that value is a 0.21, which if you look at the scale shows it's, fair to poor condition. So Coates Hall has a fair amount of work that's needed, and some of that is being addressed in this upcoming budget request as part of that condition assessment and 5-year plan. So buildings that are green, like E building, it's being renovated right now. That's obviously, it's a 1982 facility, but it's really new. So with all that information, the Facilities Management Planning Construction Department created a detailed 5-year plan dividing into 4 categories. We talked about in the beginning: recurring, which is renewal, capital equipment, non-recurring, fluctuates all the time. Remember, this is the campus improvement projects, action packs. And we need to modify this space because we have a new program that we didn't expect, and now we need to adapt for technology. They're not really part of campus master planning. They're things that need to be done. They always fluctuate. And then the last category was capital construction. Primarily driven by campus master planning. So I'll kind of move through these a little bit quick, but I wanted to try and give you a summary out of the 5-year plan and what they mean. So recurring and replacement, deferred maintenance and plan system replacement, based on the condition assessment and life cycle standards. The estimated observed system life remaining is also factored into whether or not the replacement schedule can be deferred from industry standard. And that's where we talked about, how much money did we put into this air handler, or fill in the blank. And could we squeeze a few more years out of that? And I think that's very important, because if we had to replace everything on its existing life cycle as we found it, we still have enough money to do that to catch up. So we're this 5-year plan is constantly evolving depending on the needs of college and the condition of the equipment, quite frankly. So with that, you got recurring condensed here. Normally, these are all spread out in columns. I just condensed them to only for 2025 through 28, 29. And these numbers pretty much don't change. They're pretty fixed unless we kick some of the work from year 1 to year 4, for example. So the first year, without reading through all of it, you can see it's a little over 4.3 million. As you know, from last year, we didn't have $4.3 million to apply. So we had to go and prioritize and determine what we really need to do with that 4.3 million. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. So there's a lot on here. It's a little bit busy, so but I want to make sure that you have the information. Year 1, essentially, we budgeted at $2.74 million of that 4.33. We have to line through every single building to find out what exactly needed to be done right now, what couldn't be deferred. And that's where that 2.74 number came in last year. However, because of the bond campaign, it was determined that every area that was projected for bond work would have remedied everything that we were going for in that 2.74 million. So all of the work was deferred to that effort. So with that, we didn't actually complete any of the work within the first year of the cycle, 24-25, because we anticipated the bond. So with that, we're carrying forward that dollar into this second year of the 5-year plan, which is part of the 25-26 budget request. So about 857,000. Let me go back one slide just to catch up with everybody. So you can see there's roughly 3.1 million in the second year that was projected in recurring. This is just the end of life cycle, and some things that not everything's like 15 years over. Some things are just due in the second year. So with that, we prioritized $857,000 of that 3.18 million identified in the condition assessment. So with that 857 plus the carryover, you'll see in the budget that is going for approval this year, 3.597 to be exact, million is earmarked for the condition assessment work, which is year 1 to prioritized work. So the second category is capital equipment. This is all non-recurring capitalized equipment needed specific to the campus facilities, but it is also not already included in recurring work for scheduled equipment replacement. So presently, this category only captures facilities management, planning, and construction operational equipment for the buildings, but it could also be used to capture other planned areas. And I wanted to emphasize that. So if we had IT systems or computer servers, welding equipment, academic equipment, if we had similar life cycle type inventorying, it could be added here to make one large 5-year capital plan.
Is that those examples real ones for this chart?
Those are examples that could be added to this chart. This particular chart is
Could you
just.
give an example of some of the,
Yeah, so I'm just gonna make one up, I guess. So let's say that the manufacturing department welding, I should say, has $10 million worth of welding equipment. And those all have life cycles. And so as it's presented to you that we want to replace $1 million worth of equipment, because a grant became available, that equipment that's being replaced is only halfway through its life cycle. So then those decisions can be made to say, well, is it in the best interest of the college to make that purchase or wait longer in the life cycle or repurpose? It's allows the college to pivot and make decisions based off the information available.
So Greg, what were some examples of some of the items that were in this year's 540,000 identified item?
Yeah, so and I said facilities equipment, so is what we're looking at. So the facilities department used to pick up all the leaves, for example, at the Redwood campus, 84 acres of leaves with golf carts. So roll them all up into what they called a burrito wrap. They would run into a tarp, and 2 people would just struggle to pick them up and get it onto this golf cart and then go dump them and then come back. As you can tell, that takes a long time. It's not really industry standard methodology for picking up leaves and debris. And then it's like an accident waiting to happen, with lifting up, a 200-pound leaf burrito. And so what we proposed was a piece of material collection equipment is what they call it. It can pick up leaves, it can pick up branches and grass, but more of a commercial level that you see like in a park, a municipality. And you blow everything into one big pile and you suck it up and it's done in an hour. And so that's the type of equipment that facilities proposed and purchased as well.
so could this be an example also of a truck?
It is.
Trucks, cars, vehicles that are owned by the facilities department that have a life cycle and they need to be replaced on an ongoing basis. Is that built into these?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, of that 540, one of those was a service van that was purchased. And so with that, the next slide talks about.
I have a question. Can you just tell us, remind us what's the financial definition of equipment versus, do you make that distinction?
So it has to have more than a life cycle of a year, over 5,000. Depending on where it is.
Okay, so anything under that goes into your supply line? Or is it?
It's, yes. Yes, it depends.
Yes.
You're asking an accountant, right? Who had
Yes, gonna-
one grant that once, if it's $200, but yes, generally.
Well, in this case, the van was $65,000. It was the van plus ladder equipment plus interior equipment. It's intended to be moved between Table Rock campus and Riverside primarily. It could be used to come out here, Redwood, but primarily it's to consolidate work schedules between those 2 campuses.
So when you have money for equipment like the leaf burrito you mentioned, obviously that reduces labor costs. Is there some kind of offset for
Yeah,
that?
I can only speak for myself, but I did not factor in like a life cycle cost analysis of labor versus the cost of the equipment, to figure out what like the return on investment would be. But it was pretty apparent that, you know, picking up 84 acres of leaves, I know there's one there, but we didn't do that for that particular.
Okay.
I think in an example like this, what we see is there are a lot of projects that facilities are unable to get to due to time. And by buying this equipment, they were able to work faster and they're able to get to other projects they haven't historically been able to get to. From a budgetary standpoint, I don't know if it's saved labor, like we offset by no longer needing personnel. But like the same way we have a deferred maintenance list, we have a deferred project list too. And that list can get a little shorter as they have more time available in things.
Matter of fact, thank you, Randy, because that's exactly what happened is our grounds crew, rather than spending a week able to kind of blow the leaves, leave them in a pile. That's the intent, to blow them in a pile, go do something else, come back, you know, clean it up the next day. It allows us to be much more efficient with our time and our resources being people as well. So with that, we were able to purchase everything that we said we would purchase, and through competitive pricing, we saved roughly 31,000 of that money. I need approximation because it's close, but it's close enough. So the next category is non-recurring. It's one that really isn't close by the time. And this covers campus improvement project requested by all departments. And this is a separate, it's part of the 5-year plan, but it's a separate workbook that actually is linked into this 5-year plan. Because that one changes all the time, and you know, it commingles in with our condition assessment without really interrupting the condition assessment document. So with that, the first year was about $152,000 of campus improvements, and you can see the second year was quite a bit higher at $636,000, and it fluctuates throughout the year. And I'm going to tell you right now that, you know, by the time we get into budgets next year, they're all going to change again because the priorities will change. So with that, all of the projects that were budgeted will be completed by June 30th. So that's of the $152,000 roughly. So this is a real quick backward review of everything we looked at in all colored charts, showing the first year of recurring, the 1 through 5, the capital equipment, and non-recurring, and then those totals. Like a good fiscal year and even more for contingent capacity. So the last category is capital construction. You can read this verbatim. This category identifies campus development projects identified through master planning or other long-range campus planning efforts, where large-scale design and construction projects are contracted. These types of projects are generally funded by grants, general obligation bonds, or other funding sources outside the college's operating budget. Generally, deferred maintenance is also resolved for areas being renovated through capital construction projects, much like what we were talking about with the bond effort. So following the results of the 24-25 bond campaign, all capital construction from that effort, except for the transportation technology project, were removed. So this next slide, I did make one modification. I'll point out from what you have in your, but by the time you got the packets and by the time I'm presenting today, under year 3, under capital construction, it's the only area that has any transportation technology. And in yours, it shows 8.5, but we had actually budgeted $1 million of the 8.5 in the 25-26 year for design. So I wanted it to reflect that accurate number, and I went ahead and made that one adjustment. Yeah, it's a little small in this one, but this is just a snapshot of the entire 5-year for each column. So the 5-year plan, so it's roughly 30.8 million. Why it jumps up so much is because 16 million of that is or 17 million of that is the transportation technology. So of the recurring work, you got about 8.9 million in the first 2 years. But again, we prioritized a much lower number of that, and we'll continue to prioritize as we move through the 5-year plan. And then, deferring some recurring or renewal work, it is possible, but it does compound in future years. And the condition assessment work that we completed in late 2023, usually it's every 3 to 5 years, you want to have that condition assessment done again, because not only are we working on capital projects, but we're providing maintenance as well. And so just by default, we're providing maintenance, and we have some of the units that, let's say an air conditioning unit was scheduled for year 5, but it decided to fail on year 2. So we want to capture all that in our updated condition assessment. So we will come back in the 26-27 budget cycle and be requesting or be presenting on some funds to update that condition assessment. So slide picture here. I always use this picture because the science center wasn't quite built yet. It's a neat picture with the drone. We figure out how to superimpose the science center in there. So that is the update on presentation today.
My mind works slowly, so back to the deferred maintenance, so. It can be that we don't have the money to do it and we defer it, or it can be that we don't have the laid time to do it and defer it. So in the deferred maintenance that you're describing here, is that we don't have the money or we don't get to it because of labor?
It can be a bit of both. If that makes sense. And so with the amount of money we're talking about, to catch up and renewing the buildings to fit with industry standard, there's not enough money. But depending on how big of a bite we want to take out of them, we might not have the resources internally to get it all done within each fiscal year. So if we're for this next year, the bulk of that $847,000 that we were talking about in year 2 is roofing. And we're carrying over from year 1 a lot of HVAC work. So in order to help with timelines and schedules, we're bundling that work. So all the HVAC is being put out as one invitation to bid. All of the roofing is being put out as one invitation to bid. So with that, I worked with an engineer to make sure that we're putting design plans together and specifications so that it's very clear and defined for contractors to bid on. So we get the best pricing, of course. And the same thing with the roofing, because there's layers, there's anomalies that we really just don't want to have to address on the fly. So sorry for my couch terms. Okay, I'm from Southern California originally. So, but we really just don't want to be addressing those because it equals change orders and time management is a real concern for us. So with that took a tremendous amount of effort for myself and for my team and for the contracting office to put together. And so I wanted to use that as an illustration. So like if we had $14 million worth of work in deferred, plus whatever campus developments we have, plus master planning, it does, you're right, it does start taking away from the people resources to manage that. And if we want to continue with the on time, on budget methodology that we've enjoyed here at the college, we have to balance that out. So, but when we're prioritizing, we're first looking at what does the college need? What must we replace? And if we have to replace it, but we don't have enough people to manage that work, we'll talk about that today. We haven't had that issue though.
So if you have the money budgeted for 1 year to do a project, but you don't get to it, does that roll over and is it part of the next year's, or how does that work?
It's our intent to not do that. This one kind of a 2-part answer. So because we pushed everything off to the bond effort, that obviously is a unique and time circumstance. The only time that I anticipate ever having projects carry from one year to the next would be like roofing, for example. We only have we can't do it in the middle of winter, so we have to start it in summertime. So even if we start in July 1, depending on material supply and order, maybe the project can't get started until early August. Well, by the time we get completed, we might have to carry it out to the next fiscal year because we have to stop weather. So that's probably one example that I can think of, probably not very many. That's a good one. HVAC could be another because of time, supply chain issues. We're still actually seeing some of that. It's not from COVID so much, it's just now it's starting with tariffs, but we're starting to see some supply chain issues with that and some other electrical components. So those are probably the only variables that I would anticipate would carry from one year to the next. So with that, we want to have everything completed in the year that we say we're going to complete it.
Question, Greg, would it be fair to say that this is a 5-year cycle beginning in the 24-5 that is on the heels of one that had just been completed 5 years ago? So is it safe to assume that buildings of this age would have had a capital facilities plan over time? I can't imagine.
No, because we just started this.
So I'm just looking at the age of the buildings on the Redwood campus, for example. Many of those were probably used for other purposes when the college was founded. And the HVAC systems and the mechanical systems have not been replaced. The college then purchased those buildings.
They have, and that was factored into the condition assessment. I can share that really quick, Randy. So let's say in 2002, there was a renovation, we tracked what we had done to that particular building in 2002.
Okay, for example.
And all that, yeah. So when we're talking about, I see what you're saying. If the building's 1968 and we're saying it's 11 or 20 years past, yeah.
That's where the genesis of my question.
Right. But on some of that larger equipment for sure, no, we haven't changed it because it's a very large portion of the building where it's very destructive to remove. But little like ductless split systems and things like that, yeah, we've.
To the question of, I think this question was, is it safe to assume that this 5-year plan follows a previous 5-year plan? And there wasn't a 5-year plan in place. There was a, Steve who has all the history and remembers that this and this, or that just broke down. So it's probably time they said that air conditioning quit working in that classroom. Let's go address it. So this is an example of our culture of getting to a planning and how do we assess, how do we plan? How do we, not just respond to everything? And so it's not that things weren't addressed, but often they were addressed after they came up or based on somebody's memory, it's probably time to do it. And this is the development of a system and a strategy to address.
Okay. I don't know the history.
Yeah.
And so coming in, being parachuted in the middle of this life cycle of the college, having been around for how many, 650 years or so, it's odd to me that an institution as large as this institution wouldn't have had some deferred maintenance or some recycle of keeping equipment, the facilities up to standard, up to safety. And this is a thoughtful, big systems thinking approach. So I'm pleased, it's wonderful. So great systems work. Just odd to feel that.
I think it's probably the rule, not the exception, that most nonprofit organizations don't do this.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to be a little past practitioners. I think they had a strategy. It wasn't this formalized. And so if you were to sit down with them today, they'd say, no, it wasn't purely blind. It's definitely not as mature as what you guys have adopted for today. But I can tell you how we did it back in the late 80s as we did this, we did that. So I don't think that they were flying blind. But definitely we didn't have this level of detail and ability to prepare for what might be ahead of us. But I suspect people say, I knew that if we don't replace this 2 years from now, based on the conditions and the smoke, we were going to get in trouble.
I will say though that engineers that did the condition assessment looked at every piece of equipment. And so there's nameplate data that's on there. And if you know how to read the serial code, it tells you the year that it was manufactured. And this is just a little snippet. It's a much bigger document than this, captures all that information. And so based on that, they knew that, hey, this building might have been 1968, but this unit, based off of the stamp date from the manufacturer, was 2002.
Right.
And so that went into this document as well as the memory of some people saying, hey, this tag is gone, but I know.
Yeah, that-
There when we put it in.
And so on this form here, you'll see that it says the asset approximate install date. So that's different than building. So those, I mean, look at the dates, you can see we have no buildings that are 2008. So, so we did capture the actual consumer, but I appreciate the question, because if we just went on strictly the age of the building, then we could be falsely changing equipment out that may not be as old as it really appears.
Like Building B on the Riverside campus was built in 1938. And so but yes, was renovated in 2000.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the other examples where it's in the yellow, which is a concern area, not a red, means that there had been some maintenance that had occurred over time. And it just wasn't in a systematic, thoughtful way.
Documented.
Yeah,
that way.
I'm very impressed with McKinstry is the company that we work with, and they did I mean, they spent weeks out here in the whole process. We started early spring. We didn't get done until like literally just before Christmas break. And then we read that document in the 2024 budget cycle. So it did a fantastic job. It's just so much information, and I'm glad that the college made that commitment. This will set the college in a planful way for many years, as long as we keep up on the document.
Is it safe to assume that it was a heavier lift initially, that if we were to go back and, and revisit it, right, we're revisiting an established process, so we would anticipate some cost savings as a result of the initial investment?
Yes, that is true.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I have a sidebar, but I really want to work with the consultants as well to incorporate the maintenance that we spent in each of the buildings as part of that index number. So we're just looking at deferred maintenance and replacement values versus replacement of the building. What about all the money that we've been spending in the facility itself? And so I want that to go into that formula, which is going to change that number. But I want it to be a live connection to our FMX program, so that those condition indexes are constantly rotating on a live basis, if that makes sense.
One of the ways that this document comes into play is if we decide we're gonna remodel a building, and we have an opportunity, we're gonna get in there and move some stuff. Well, then we look at the equipment. So what's the condition of it? Should we replace it now, or is it worth just waiting on it to? So there are times that like we get on or stay on a schedule. It's like, okay, we're looking at visiting the equipment in this building because we're looking to remodel. So that sometimes pushes the agenda on some of the things. And because we have it documented, it's a lot easier to say, oh, yeah, that is a 15-year-old unit. We're gonna construct around. How about we just get rid of that unit and not construct around it and do it?
So tomorrow we have an invitation to bid that will come out for all the lifting projects that we talked about, and one for the HVAC projects that we talked about, which is roughly 65 units throughout the district that will be placed as part of one large maintenance effort. And the intent is to bring a contract back before you at the June board meeting.
So on the funding side, Randy, where the board might have a role if we were ever to approve a bond, for example, to be able to fund these projects over time. So in the next, say, 1 to 3 to 5 years, is the plan then to use existing fund balance that could be a match to state match money that would then fund some of these projects over an iterative process? Is that a plan?
Sort of, I'll answer it this way, right? So when we look at like the plan to use state match projects, like there are probably some things on the list here that if we do a state match so the state match project won't just take care of this. The
No.
state mat project requires an independent project that meets certain criteria. But let's say down the road, we say a state match project is to rehab TRC. We say that that's a project. What Greg's gonna do is say, okay, how much of what's in here can we bake into that
Yes.
project? So I can capture it into that. So we're not asking them for state match project here. And that's kind of what the bond was. That's why that got pushed aside. Had the bond been approved, the work that was gonna be done to this building would have been inclusive of the roof. Since we didn't approve the bond, well, the roof still needs to be done. So now we need to use budgeted money for that. So I don't know that the plan is just, we always pursue the opportunity. When we go after a project, how can we leverage the opportunity to tackle as many things on the list while we're doing that project versus neglecting those things on the list? And that's not always done. There are a lot of institutions and organizations that will buy a lot of bright and shiny things and neglect their deferred things until or when they break down. And so the responsible approach that Greg and his team take to say, okay, this might be a really good opportunity to use this project that you're requesting your funding, whether it's through state, bond, institutional funds, and tackle this thing on our list.
Awesome.
Thank you. I like it too.
But it's not uncommon, right? You may see a place where, and it's facilities and IT, it's so important when people want to do projects, you gotta work with them. Because people are like, wow, we just remodeled this room, and IT comes in and says, yeah, in 18 months from now, all your wiring around that room is outdated. So let's go in and dig a bunch of holes in that work you just did. And that's the beauty of having these conditions and assessments and say, okay, while we only want to spend this much on the project, we better go in and do all the IT infrastructure too. We're gonna be revisiting that space we just painted to make it look pretty way too soon.
So it sounds like that there is a plan in the 5 years, the 5-year plan to identify pockets of funding that could then be either matched or cobbled together with new construction to be able to address these over time.
He's looking for funding solutions, whether it's our general fund or capital or alternative funds like EDA grants have helped support some of our projects. I suspect that, you know, the transportation projects are a little different because they will be standalones, but if maybe our next state grant project is visiting existing square footage, you would see a number of things on the list, and whatever that project includes, be addressed as part of that project. So yeah, I think and the sneak peek, this presentation from Greg today precedes next month's presentation, which is here's what we're doing about capital projects moving forward and how we might approach them. So we really wanted to clearly demonstrate to you we're keeping a pulse on our college and the conditions of our college, while we're also talking about a way plan for facility needs as we move forward for workforce training in our community.
Great, thank you so much.
Do we donate equipment that we get new stuff, but there's still life in the old stuff? Do we donate?
Typically, no. There are some environmental charges and whatnot that go with disposing of equipment that has refrigerant, for example, and other materials. We haven't really considered that. We have an apprenticeship program, but really if we're donating to that, we're kind of donating to ourselves.
Well, the other thing you might point out, you see how old our stuff gets before we replace it. There aren't really many takers for like, anybody want a 38-year-old air compressor? They're like, oh, I think we're good. So yeah,
Maybe a parts company.
we wear the heck out of them before we pass them on. And at that point, they don't have a lot of value to others.
Yeah, I will say though, that in past, it's not really our practice now, but unless there ever was a one-time need, but the college has taken an older piece of equipment that's being demolished from a building space that still had some life in it and moved it over to this other location that happened to be a like for like, to get a little more life out of this area. And so, but I think what we're doing here now, it's a little different. These units that are going to go away with this next contract, they just need to go away.
Other questions?
I'm very thankful we had the really deep
presentation, when the first thing came out, so that I had some Velcro in my brain to connect things to this time. Much easier than.
Was it last May or the May
May
before?
before.
It was January of 2024. Yeah. Is that correct? Yeah, it is January.
Yeah, I think it's,
I give presentations very often, so.
I can tell you where we were.
I think it was at
It was
Riverside.
Riverside, yeah.
Riverside. That's right. It was January.
And we were all cuddled up next to this little TV and out in the back.
You voted on the motion for the bond.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah, 2020.
See, there you go.
All right, well, thank you, Greg. Really appreciate this, the richness of this data and conversation. Thank you. All right, anything else? So we have nothing else on the special agenda, so we will adjourn the special meeting at 4:45 and we'll take a 15-minute break.
15-minute breaks.
Don't.